Tēnā koutou, nau mai, haere mai ki our farm. Good morning and welcome to today's online focus field day. Sorry for the delay getting everybody on board. It was more of a challenge trying to get this sorted than it is to do the work on the farm, isn't it, Tom?
Yep.
But thank you for persisting and thank you for sharing your day with us today. We would have loved to have had you out on farm. We've had 2 focus days now that we've done online, and while it's been great to be able to share the information and have you access it after the event, it's always a challenge without having the public here with us to share our day. So just for those who may not have met me before, I'm Jo Sheridan, the demonstration manager for our farm, and Tom Buckley, who's the farm manager. As you're probably aware, our farm is a joint venture between St Peter's and Lincoln University, and we've got sort of dual aims of sharing our learnings with the wider farming community, as well as presenting educational opportunities for the students and giving them exposure to the dairy industry. And we're really lucky because we're well supported by our 6 industry partners who bring the expertise around products and services to the table to help us to achieve their goals. So big thanks to LIC, PGG Wrightson's, Dairy NZ Balance, Farm Source and Westpac who help us bring these sorts of events together. Just a couple of things before we get going is that on the Our Farm website you'll find a copy of the handout. We'll try and refer to the handout pages as we go through the graphs because some of them might be a bit hard to see on the PowerPoint. So yeah, there's more detail in the handout there. The way that we're going to run today is that we're going to have sort of half an hour on the season in review, where Tom and I will talk about certain parts of the season, and then we'll have some time to talk about our reflection on that and our planning for the 2021 season. And then we're really lucky today to have Michael Hyde, who is the lead for the Cooperative Difference at Fonterra. And as most of you are probably aware, there was an announcement yesterday made about how that space is changing a little bit, and we're lucky to have Michael's going to zoom in on a call, and we'll have the opportunity to hear from him and then understand the implications for what it means for our farm systems in the future. And we should have a little bit of time for questions at the end, so feel free to ask questions. The little box on your right as you're watching this, we can pick them up and we can see these questions, and we'll try and integrate them as we go through today. And we're planned to finish at 12 o'clock. Now remember that if you do leave at any stage, you can always come back and watch this clip, or if you want to share it with people, you know, feel free to do so as well. Okay, so just because we couldn't have you out on the farm today, do you know what? We've decided to provide a virtual tour for you. So we're going to show you a quick video of the farm in all its glory. Well, we hope you enjoyed watching that video and getting a bit of a tour of the farm. It's the, I guess you call it the southern, the side nearest to the Cambridge Township, which we don't often get to visit when we have groups out. So it's quite nice to be able to see the different terraces and a lot of the plantings and sort of diverse landscape that sits on that side of the farm. So just as a quick overview before we go into detail, you're probably quite well aware that we use a balanced scorecard approach. So On page 6 of your handout, you'll see our comparisons. These are our preliminary findings for the season that we've just analysed to date. Bearing in mind, finishing in May, we've just managed to try and get close to finalising our financial information. What we've been able to do is compare this year against the previous years. And as you can see in general terms, we've started to push out closer to our targets on our wagon wheel. Now, I'm just going to point to a couple of things along the way. What we're going to do is we're going to start off talking a little bit about the productivity from homegrown feed and efficient milk production, which was challenging for us this year given the dry conditions we had, wasn't it, Tom? And then we'll talk a little bit about animal welfare, and we'll talk a little bit about our workplace performance, and then community perception, some of the environmental outcomes, and then also the business outcomes or financial health of our business. So we'll keep referring to these as we go, and we'll try and provide some more detail under each of these KPIs. Right, so I'm going to hand over to you, Tom, to start us on this journey, please.
Morning all. This is a bit of a snapshot of where we've come from. This was taken back in March when we put the drone up, and yes, you can see how hard it's obviously been. Everyone's been through the same journey. But great to be surrounded by green grass again and have our target covers up to our desired levels heading into calving. You can see just in the centre of the photo there, the cocksfoot's holding on. They did have an application of effluent, but we were able to get an extra grazing or two compared to the rest of the farm. Some photos here of how dry the wetland got. Some severe cracks there. But once we did actually receive some rain, we actually saw a lot of bulrush seedlings germinate, and with not a lot of rain swamping them, they've actually been able to grow really well and start filling up that huge area that's been killed by sort of ducks in there over the last few years. And our journey over the next few seasons is to get that replanted over time. And on the right there, you can't really see it, but there is a pre and a post-graze on the left and pre on the right. Even with this little grass in the diet, this was about 3 kilos offered on a 60 to 70 day round, along with the turnips or kale with silage and a bit of palm kernel. The cows were pretty content on that diet through the summer. As we all know, it was a pretty dry season with only 753 mils over the 1920 season. Our 50-year average is 12 to 1300, so a long way short of that. You can see here, here's my pointer, growth rates just really fell through the floor starting back in November, and on the top graph there we saw that soil moisture really start to drop in mid-October, down to its lowest point in January, and then we're starting to see a rise now, but we're still a long way short of where we need to be. Fingers crossed we don't get a flood through calving, because it's not really what I want, but fingers crossed we get a wetter summer than what we've just been through. Low summer average pasture covers meant rigorous planning through March and April to ensure we kept an eye on the end of season pasture covers and body condition score targets. A key part of our success, I believe, was our continual weekly monitoring and feed reviews. Joe and I would meet on a Tuesday, and then during lockdown, it was over Zoom or on the phone. We took half the farm and we would do a farm walk each, and collate our numbers at the end. So even through lockdown, we were able to keep our eye on the target. And we were monitoring our pasture covers, how much baleage or silage we had left, and palm kernel too, and making a plan to run with for the next 7 days. And that took a lot of the stress out of the weekly or the daily planning, because we knew we had a plan for 7 days and we were going to run with it, and then we would reassess the following Tuesday. This season we finished just over 167,000 solids compared to last year's 169. That's only 1.2% below last year's production, but 6% below our original budget of 174,000 kilos. But considering the 300-tonne shortfall in the homegrown feed, I'm pretty happy with the result. During the dry summer, we analysed using FarmMax options that we had. So we came up with we only needed to buy in sort of an extra 50 tonne of feed, and we costed that out at $20,000. Unfortunately, with everyone else in the same situation, the price of baleage and palm kernel went up, so we were only able to purchase 30 tonne for that $20,000. But we were able to reach 167,000 kilos. If we didn't purchase that extra feed, we would have likely to have dried everything off early and only reached 154,000. So pretty happy that we were able to do over 20,000 kilos, over 10,000 kilos more than that option. And also to carry on milking to the end of May as well with that cool mob. Here on the graph, this sort of splodgy area, that's just where we were on 3 and 2 milking. So we had one small pickup on the single milking day, and then one large milking, with the 2. We use milking frequency to preserve body condition score and manage heat stress and reduce our work hours as we spent more time feeding out. By the end of December, we already had 65 cows on once a day. These actually transitioned quite well onto 2 and 3 milking. On the 4th of January, we transitioned the whole herd onto 3 and 2 milking, and then on the 11th of February, all cows went to once a day. We only saw a minimal drop in production as we transitioned between twice a day, 3 and 2, and then onto once a day. Cell count only caused an issue closer to the end when we were dealing with low volumes of milk. In December, we saw a slight increase in production. I believe this was driven by some low PWs that were just eating food and not producing any milk. So our per cow production actually saw a lift there. And also, we were able to get some good quality feed in there with our November silage paddocks coming back into the round. And then on the 23rd of December, we received 27 mils of rain, which was the last we would see for 3 months. As a result of growing approximately 13.9 tonne, we were able to produce 931 kilos of milk solids from homegrown feed. While this is a disappointing result compared to previous seasons, it does refocus us on how important summer feed strategies are at our farm. We're going into next season with lower soil moisture levels again, which is great for winter utilisation and building cover, but it will be challenging for crop yields if we don't get a corrective rainfall heading into summer. We're intending on planting turnips and kale slightly differently this year, and I'll touch on that at the end. For the majority of the season, we run a grass-based system, and as you can see on this FarmMax graph here, palm kernel supplement is very lightly used through the early part of the season. As we see our pasture covers drop heading into summer, we can start applying some supplement into the diet. And this is a combination of crops, palm kernel and silage, both made on farm and bought in. Over here we've got our milker diet, and you can see, as I just said, we've changed the diet as we've seen a deficit looming, and up here we've got very little grass in the diet, but we were able to keep them going at 1.2 solids a day for sort of 2.5 months, which was pretty good. Down here we used a high palm kernel diet for our dry cows. We're using up to 80% of their diet in the form of palm kernel. This was 5 to 6 kilos of palm kernel with 2 kilos of silage and 1 kilo of grass, just as a fresh break for feeding that silage out. This allowed them to be on the slowest round possible, and was a key part of our strategy of getting to our end of May target of 2,400. We didn't quite get there because we had other stock at home early, but we hit 2,350 and now we're sitting at 25, just over 2,500. So pretty good position to be in, having bottomed out at 1,605 back in March. Our culling and drying off strategy was key again to our success, though we had to make some adjustments because we couldn't get our culls away, so that drove us to dry off some lighter cows and keep milking those culls for a little bit longer until they were able to get into the works. I'll quickly run through our drying off. Oh, it's in, so yeah, rather than me reeling off quite a few lines there, it's on page 13 of the handout. But yeah, basically, if we were unable to feed a cow to produce milk and hit a body condition score with days to calving, then she was dried off. So this season we would have, in our cropping paddocks, we would have grown 5.5 tonnes on average between October and March. So this is what we call pasture foregone. Our crops actually grew 7 to 10 tonne in that same time period. So we were growing more crops than we did grass. Because they didn't yield as much as we had hoped, just because of the lack of rain, this drove the cost of our kale up to 28 cents a kilo of dry matter and turnips to 38 cents. Though this sounds quite expensive, when we actually went out to market and sourced in silage, that was priced at 60 cents a kilo and palm kernel at 45 cents. So turnips and kale still a cheaper feed option, and we were able to grow it on farm, and that's what we're trying to do, is try and feed as much as we can off homegrown feed. As I mentioned before, lost my mouse now. As I mentioned before, we're looking at maximising growth potential of kale this year, and we're going to be planting that on the 1st of October and delaying the planting of our turnips. We're going to be using the new Toto variety, which we had in our trial paddock last year. This is an early maturing variety, and then use clean crop bulb turnip, which we're able to actually plant on the same day, so one less visit for Greg to come back and do small areas for us. The beauty of the kale is it's not going to go off, so we can maximise our yield by putting it in 3 weeks early, but also utilise that later on in the season if we get a nice growing season over summer and our yields of turnips are up to where we're budgeting, that sort of 12-13 tonne. Really happy with how clean crop is performing for us. Obviously, we can't change what the weather's doing, so but it's creating a lovely clean seed bed for us to plant our new grasses in the autumn, and they're looking really strong, having had their second grazing. So this graph here is just showing our weekly farm walk data collated over a 12-month period, showing the difference between our best growing paddock and our worst growing paddock. There are some paddocks that were in that video just at the beginning, and we will likely lose those in a number of years for subdivision. But so there's been a lot less regrassing done down there. So those, the lowest ones, I kind of discount them. They're good for standing cows off and not slowing our round down. But at the top end, we're looking at 16 tonne. The paddocks that we've actually put annuals in prior to cropping have seen the best, obviously the best results, and that confirms why we use annuals to bolster our winter feed supply compared to leaving it in permanent pasture. This year we'll be putting our crops into our better growing paddocks to try and maximise our yield, and then we'll use grass to grass regrassing in some of the sandier soils that wouldn't support turnips over summer. On a paddock by paddock basis, we see a strong variation in yield to date, as I just said, with the bottom paddocks growing 6 tonne a year versus the 16 tonne. Again this year we used a variety of regrassing methods: undersowing, grass to grass and post-crop cross-drilling. We used Coxford again in the lighter soils, as we've seen continued positive results for our using that Coxfoot Savvy variety. We've used a bit of Italian, a mix of Lush or Mohaka, and we've put some red clover in for high yielding paddock down on that sandy block. Just give that a go. Good picture of how well the farm looks. This was taken on the 28th of May. It's fantastic compared to that first photo in my slide. All that hard work's paid off, and we've achieved our body condition score targets and our average pasture cover, and it's all set up well for the 2021 season.
Awesome. And Tom, just before we go into the next section, just checking if there's any questions that have come through. So if you do have any questions as we go through, feel free to just type them in and we'll try and deal with them as we can. So we've got about 10 minutes to get through these, Tom.
Cows are looking great, and we've reached our target. When we had the vets come and do an individual condition score for the whole herd at the end of May, we're looking at about 5.8. They've probably come back a little bit from that, holding them tight over winter, making best use of this great utilisation weather, and we haven't made a mess, but we've cleaned out a lot of those pastures, and we've got some awesome quality for us to start milking on heading into this season. Due to the lack of feed at our graziers, again due to the lack of rain over summer, we brought our R2s home, because when we went down to weigh them in mid-April, we found they'd actually lost weight since their weighing at the end of February. So we jumped on that, and we wanted to get them closer to target. We started with 52% behind target and managed to get this down to 29% within the 6 weeks they were home, with an average daily gain of 0.9 kilos. We also brought our calves home while they transitioned to a new grazier, and they continued to gain weight, and we also used them to get our first grazings off our new grass. Great help that was, instead of having a bunch of R2s running around. Using that lighter stocking definitely helped with that first grazing, and now we're today the mature cows are having their second grazing off those paddocks, so that's really good, and we'll leave the last 3 paddocks for the first milkers to go through in early to mid-July. As we've discussed over the last couple of months, and just said now, body condition and calving date were a key driver of drying off, and if we're unable to feed that cow enough to support milking and provide enough to gain body condition score, she was dried off. We did, by the end, have to dry off some well-conditioned cows due to cell count, but these were only a handful along the way. FEI was, that's the next slide. Cell count, as I just said, a little bit hard towards the end of the season, driven mainly by low volumes. We didn't have to treat many clinical cases towards the end, but we were able to keep that 103 cows milking to the 28th of May, which is really good, the longest I've milked in the last 12 years. So, every day we were still making money. The last 12, 14 days we were doing it all off grass, so we were producing cheap milk again, so that was also a great feeling. We did unfortunately end up with 2 cell count grades for the last 2 pickups. A little bit disappointing, but we were just biding our time to get the vets in to help us dry off that last mob of cows. We had 3 FEI spikes that put us into a C, but we were able to bring them back down again. Obviously, with not a lot of feed around over summer, it was really hard to manage our FEIs, but we've got a few learnings, and we'll look at purchasing or making more homegrown silage this year to fill that feed gap instead of relying on palm kernel. And with the current feed flow plan for spring, it doesn't look like we'll need to lean on it a lot for our milkers, but we will use it for carrying magnesium or calcium for our freshly calved cows. As we discussed at the March Focus Day, we're really pleased with the outcomes of last season's mating program, with 6-week in-calf rate of 74% and not in-calf rate of 10%. Same 6-week calf rate as last year or the previous season, and 3% improvement in our nodding calf rate. This year was the first year that we used sex semen, and we got the same conception rate as our conventional semen, which was great to see. We also used Wagyu as well on the bottom 20% of the herd, and this has meant that we'll see a 50% reduction in bobby calves for the coming spring. With using sex semen, we had to use less hormonal intervention on the herd. We still used 15% seeders, and we used conventional semen on these animals, and we got a 55% in calf rate on those cows. We opted to not to use the Y-weight program as we have done in the previous seasons, and this has meant that we'll probably miss out on 2.4 days of milk per cow over the whole herd. This is likely to see less milk out the gate early on, but we hope to recoup this later on in the season. Sex semen will be available earlier this year, so we'll likely use over the top 70% of the herd and use more Wagyu to further reduce our bobby calves. This season we had an awesome on-farm team, and a lot of great results are down to their hard work that they put in through the season and help me out. We have developed some really efficient systems over the past 5 seasons that have allowed us to streamline our operation. This has led us to achieve a critical target of 45 hours per week on average over the season, and there you see on that slide maximum hours through August as we transition from being busy calving and starting to do other jobs on the farm. But a key driver of reducing our hours while actually maintaining days off in a roster, everyone was able to take rostered time off and leave when they required it. Everyone is trained to do nearly every job, so it didn't matter if I or one of the other staff members was away, we all knew how to do it. So that was a key element in getting our hours reduced. This year we'll be reducing from 3 full-time staff down to 2.5 with the use of a relief staff member. He will be able to help feed his calves and do milkings and cover time off and rostered leave. Last spring we carried out a time task recording, and this recorded time spent doing each task on farm, and we highlighted some key areas of time spent doing jobs on farm. So we've analysed this over the season, and we will do this recording again in this coming spring and mating and see whether we've seen any improvement in time spent doing everything.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. I'm just waiting to see where all the questions are. I thought surely there might be a few coming through, but no doubt as you start to ruminate over everything you've heard and some of the things you've seen through your handout, some questions might come up. So we've got time allocated at the end if people want to ask you about some of the information that you've already presented, Tom. So that kind of covers off sort of 3 aspects of the wagon wheel. So we talked about productivity from a homegrown feed. We talked about how challenging that was this season. Our animal performance. We made some good gains in some of the animal welfare challenges. But we also, it was hard with such a year with a dry season, hard to get that productivity from the livestock that we would have wanted. So we're still pushing in that front. We're pretty proud of our hours worked per person goal. That's a pretty lofty goal to achieve. We worked hard to try and collect the data around that and start to really analyse where we spend our time. It's quite different on every farm, but it really gives us some good information about where technology might fit within our particular system. So that was great information to be able to analyse. So some of the other wedges within our wagon wheel approach include our community perception. So just a couple of things about that. I mean, it's as a demonstration farm for us, we have quite a large range of stakeholders at our farm, and that includes the student, the staff and their whānau of St Peter's, the urban community of of Cambridge, so all the people that we deal with on a daily basis, and the wider Waikato farming community. And we've got followers who are international, not just in the Waikato community, and we endeavour to demonstrate demonstrate really good farming practices all the time, taking care of people, animals and the environment. So this year, prior to lockdown, we actually had about 590 odd people on farm. We posted 52 weekly updates with over 4,000 followers, and we produced publications. We were able to have Minister of Agriculture on the farm, and we had numerous classrooms there as well, which was great. But sadly, we've been unable to host 2 of our open days on farm, and our most popular public open day, which often draws about 600 people to the farm. So, and that's where we sort of gauge some of the public perceptions around how they perceive our farm. So while we don't have an exact data point for this part of the wedge, we will have the capability to sort of measure that again once we're able to engage and ask those questions of the public. So there's just a couple of photos of people out with our farm walk. Kids, we love hosting the school kids. They love going out on the trailer, out to the wetlands, and being able to see the stock there. And of course, we've got some really great engaged students at St Peter's who love digging holes, love exploring the farm, learning to put up fences, etc. The next wedge of our pie that I wanted to, of the wagon wheel that I wanted to talk to you about was our environmental performance. So in your handout, what we've got there is some of the Overseer FarmX modelling results. So this is page 28. This slide is a little bit blurry to see. These are the preliminary results that we've put in, but it's really interesting to see what the numbers are starting to tell us. So what you'll see on the top line there is the total in-loss for our whole farm, and what we've done is benchmark the year ending 2017 all the way down to the year ending 2020. So we've started to see a decline in total in-loss, which of course when we look at per hectare basis has gone down from 43 down to about 33 this year. Our goal, our original goal in the wagon wheel was to hit 27, so we are slowly getting closer to that. Our total P loss has gone down from 180 down to 142 over that time, and on a per hectare basis that's about 0.8 per hectare. And our greenhouse gas losses have gone down from 12,000 down to about 11,000. The greenhouse gas is a really interesting one. The system has evolved over time, primarily focusing on methane emissions by having a reduced stocking rate and less broadened feed. We can't continue on that journey forever, so we're at the point now where we're starting to look at what other efficiencies can we gain within our system that tackle both the methane and the nitrous oxide and potentially a small part of the carbon dioxide loss within our farm business. That's what the numbers say, but the numbers are an evaluation of the inputs we put into it. What I wanted to kind of share with you a little bit about is what we're actually doing. What are the things that we're controlling on a day-to-day basis to have a positive impact on our environment? So, of course, we're working through our farm environment plan actions. We have that list up there on the wall. We're always checking off to see what jobs need to be done, how are we contributing towards these, what money do we need to put into the budget to work towards achieving some of these actions that are in our environment plan. We're using Sustain N, and this year we used SureFOS as well, which has a positive contribution to our P loss that I showed you on our earlier slide. Wetland area, our wetland area was about 3 years old now, isn't it, Tom? So this year we harvested some of the biomass just on recommendation from one of our consultants there, and we also looked at subdividing the plants. So what we wanted to have is more active growing plants taking up nitrates out of that area to make sure that that wetland area as a biological system was able to function in its best way. Buffer zones and crop paddocks, so making sure that where we are planting kale and turnips that we have got clear buffer zones, so we're minimising any movement of pea through soil movement, and making sure that that's been utilised and planned for each year. And management of total N loading, so that includes application rates, but it also includes when we apply it and where we apply it. And so we've got more and more information about how we plan that out. We use FarmX modelling to plan out our nitrogen applications, and we also use tracking to find out sort of where things have gone. So that gives us a little bit more detail about making sure we're applying it in a safe and timely manner. And retirement and planting of at-risk areas. So any area where we think there's potential for either soil movement or soil erosion, or through the process of cows going in there and grazing, or it's a poor performing area that we don't want to be putting fertiliser on. Those are the areas that we look at to analyse, is it best in partial grazing or is there something else we can do with that land? And of course direct drill for pasture and crops, so no-till management for our renovation strategies. And sharing the story. So, part of what we're trying to do is also share what we're doing on farm, find out from other farmers around their environmental practice, and then look to see what's applicable to our farm and what we do. And you would have seen in the video right at the start, as you travel down, you can see the terraces that we're dealing with. All of them have different soil types, and also you can see all the riparian strips and the planted strips that we've got amongst our pastoral land there. And it makes for a really nice farm environment, doesn't it, Tom, when you get to drive around through all that. Okay, so the last wedge that I want to talk about before we talk about next year and bring Michael on is business performance. So very briefly, because we are still finalising our year-end stuff, this is where we've sort of got to, and you'll find this information in your handout, which is page 29. What I've done is I've provided the dairy base figures from the last 3 years for our farm compared to the benchmark. Now, our benchmark is top 20% Waikato owner-operators, and we've done a preliminary analysis of how we've ended up. So what has it cost us this year to achieve what we've done? I guess a couple of key figures is that our operating profit at around about 2,800 is higher than the previous years. Excuse me. Common practice for us when we analyse our operating profit is to stabilise it at a $6 payout. Once we do that, that number is going to drop quite significantly. Decisions that we made around how much we paid for board and supplements, to do race work on the farm, we would not have made at a $6 payout, but you do at a $7 plus payout. So I guess the key thing is that we're happy with the profit that we generated for our business, but if we compared it with a standardised payout, it's going to look worse performing than previous years. Our operating expenses came in at about $5.32 versus the previous year, which was $4.97. So there was extra cost there associated with regrassing, cropping, bringing in extra feed as a result of the drought, and also some choices we made around 30k of extra race work that we did. We will hope to, once we get this information finalised, what we'll do is we'll run it all through Dairy Base. Our farm is an individual benchmark on Dairy Base, and once that information is finalised, you'll all be able to access our information and then be able to compare your farm business against our farm. This is just the cash flow. I haven't put this in your handout, but I guess the general trend, like Tom talked a lot about how we responded to the season. What happened is once the payout got revised up, we kind of had a look at our financial situation, and with the reduced milk solids but with increased payout, we kind of ended up with the same or similar type of income. So along those lines, if we revised our budget halfway through the year up to a $7.30 payout, if we compared our end result to the revised payout, we would have had 135k less surplus. But when we compare it with the original budget, which was done at about $6.40, we ended up with about 40k less surplus. So that was a result of 10,000 k's less milk solids, but the payout, like I said, compensated for that reduced production. And of course we had about 30k of extra costs on races and about another 20 on cropping and feed costs. So where we ended up was kind of only about 40k or so less than what we had originally planned. So we were always monitoring the budget, we were always feeding back to our management committee where we were sitting, and then we were able to make choices on how the income was coming in and where we expected our expenses to be. And it guided how much money we did spend during the dry period. I've also got in your handout, I won't talk about this in detail, but the breakdown of each of the different cost areas. This is really quite nice to be able to see and compare against your own. I'll just quickly go through that. and that will allow you to be able to do that in your own time. Okay, so just briefly before we bring on Michael, I'll just check if there's any questions. No questions? Okay. So the plans for 2021. So reflecting on where we've come from this year and what some of our, I guess, key goals or aspirations are for the season ahead and things that we're sort of thinking about. So as you know, our farm, it was a two-stage process for our farm. One was being able to stabilise a profitable system, and the second stage was to evolve the system to sort of future-proof it. Louise Cook, who was here prior to me, did a lot of analysis on various system choices. Excuse me. And out of these came kind of two clear pathways. One was de-intensification, which of course removes cash flow and milk out of our local economies, and one was sort of off-paddock feeding facilities and bringing in low-protein feeds such as maize silage along with growing summer crops. So I guess we're at the point where slowly the environmental indicators from the wider industry are becoming clearer to us, but we are actually going through a period of uncertain global outcomes. So with the 8 partners involved at a governance level, we are redesigning the perimeters that are aligned with our stakeholder expectations and our catchment goals. So while this model has served us well for the last sort of 5 years, some of these measurements are probably not big drivers of the way our system will look and the way it will function. So we're going to go through the process now of making sure we are picking the right targets. Is the target big enough? What's a minimum standard within that, and how are we expected to report against these parameters? So for us, what that means is that we can keep continuing on the journey, we can keep progressing towards this, and we can keep creating greater clarity on what our future looks like. So as Tom already mentioned, we're greater focus on our summer at-risk period and looking at yield not just for pasture renovation. Options potentially for reduced palm kernel in response to quality milk production. We were challenged a bit with our FEI and we need to start looking at sort of what alternatives have we got in place so we don't have that pressure on the milk quality, the quality of milk that we're sending, and that we're meeting the goals of our processes. We're looking from an animal perspective about monitoring thermal heat index and deploying mitigation strategies for animal welfare. So that's a really big thing with public perception, with so many people out on the farm, is we know that it's going to be hot, we know that cows will be challenged, but we also know that there are things that we can do to ensure that cows, that we are meeting their welfare needs. And also along that line is about reduced wastage on farm, which is part of our mating strategy that we're deploying over the next few years. We're also looking for the opportunity to utilise technology to create a safer and more efficient workplace. And that's including farm system technology integration. So when we look at our system and any capital investment, we always think about where we're spending most of our time, where are risks to our farm system, and how do we create an enjoyable and sustainable workplace. And then we need to then offset that investment in capital with potentially reduced expenditure on people on farm. So each farm's quite different, but for us, one of the next steps really is about something that integrates whole farm system decision making, and we'll continue to progress that front throughout this next sort of 12 months as well. The other parts that we're working on, of course, are fresh water management integration into our farm environment plan. So we're really keen to make sure that that's fully integrated and that we know what steps and actions we need to take to ensure the quality of our that we are managing our environmental externalities out of our farm system. And we want to develop a plan to support shade and shelter objectives as well for the farm. And it's really interesting, this whole environmental KPI front. We're starting to analyse information about soil water movement. We've got soil moisture probes down to 600 mils now, and that will give us information about soil drainage events. And we have also got a lot of information now coming through from Overseer and through FarmX. So Overseer, for example, shows us our methane, our nitrous oxide and our carbon dioxide contributions. This is just a breakdown here that I've shown you. It actually allows you to start to see which areas do we start to prioritise and look for strategies to look to continue reducing them. and also on a block-by-block basis. So when we're managing our blocks, which areas have things like the greatest nitrogen loss, and therefore how would we prioritise, or how do we analyse each of these regions, each of these blocks, and develop strategies for them. Another example is FarmX. FarmX can now give you your nitrogen balance over the months. So we're starting to get some information, and when we're planning out what our farm system might look for the 12 months, we can start to see how some of our operational decisions will actually impact on our environmental outcomes. So there's a whole lot of information, but a whole lot of learning that goes with trying to interact and sort of make sense out of all this new information that's now available to us. And the last couple of things there is that we are engaging with DairyNZ's Taking Action group to get more information and feedback from our peers, and making sure we're enriching our communities through our interactions, sharing our learnings and our discussions along the way. Okay, so very quickly, the last few things around the 2021 year is the financial side of it. So we have continued to budget on a $6.15 payout. We zero budgeted each of our expenditure areas aligned with achieving our balanced scorecard goals, and that equated to farm working expenses of around $840,000, and that's to achieve about 175,000 kilos of milk solids. So we've sort of scaled down our production target slightly. But it does really highlight to us when we go through each of those areas that there is a true cost to striving towards achieving these outcomes, a 45-hour week, reducing nitrogen losses, all those areas that we're working towards actually have some of the animal welfare stuff, environmental outcomes, all have a cost to their system, and it's really important that you budget that in. And what we look to do is make sure we've got complementary benefits. So when we're investing in animal welfare or environmental outcomes, we want to see a productivity improvement in that. We want to be able to capture that within our system, because that gives us true value, creates true productivity. We've also, on recommendation from our Farm Management Committee, produced a second budget, which is based on a $5 payout. We've decided to play the game of two halves. So the first half we're investing in getting cows and calf and producing sort of 60% plus of our milk solids. And then the second half of the game, depending where the global situation ends up, we've got about 80k potentially of expense that we can move out of the system with a revised milk solids target. So we've planned for both approaches. I guess starting the season we have to plan out to get cows and calf and to do that early season production, but we've also got a little bit of flexibility in choices that we make after the end of December. Okay, so just checking on questions. Any questions along the way? No? Cool. Any questions, Tom? Okay, so we've kind of gone through quite a lot of detail there, and you know, you will appreciate that Tom and I are always available. If you've got questions that come out of today, you can always come to the farm on Tuesdays for our farm walk, or text us or via Facebook if something else comes up. But hopefully we've able to provide a bit of a summary of the year that's been and a little bit about our plans for the future. I guess one of the things that we're considering is how we get value or add value to our product, and how that integrates into our total farm system. And so it's been really cool to be able to catch up with Michael Hyde, who is the lead of the Cooperative Difference at Fonterra. And you'll all be quite well aware that yesterday Miles sent out an email just describing how that space is changing and how things might look a little bit different. So we're really lucky to have Michael here now. He is zooming in to us from down in I think Canterbury, and he's going to cover off a bit of a presentation around that cooperative difference, and we'll also have time for questions and answers for him as well. So hopefully you're there, Michael. Good morning and welcome to the Our Farm Focus Day.
Good morning, Jo. Can you hear me all right?
Oh yeah, that's wonderful. What's the weather like down there?
It is beautiful and sunny, of course.
Oh, great. As usual. That's awesome, Michael. Well, thank you for taking the time to be here, Michael. Things must be pretty busy for you at the moment with your recent announcement about the changes in the cooperative difference. It's great to have you here. We're really looking forward to hearing a little bit about what that might mean for us as we plan moving forward.
Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity.
Cool.
So we're good to go, are we?
Yeah, you're all good to go. Everybody should be able to see the slides that you're presenting, and there may be a visual link to you on the side as well. Yep, and they have the opportunity to ask questions. So if any questions come through, Michael, I'll just verbalise them to you.
Cool, thanks very much. Okay, so my plan for today was basically to talk about the cooperative difference as it exists today, and then also to talk a little bit about those announcements that we made yesterday and what that means for the future of the framework as we go forward. So the cooperative difference, what is it? It's essentially our framework for dealing with everything that we do on farm. So you know, all of those practices and procedures that are potentially going to impact on the expectations of our customers, our communities, our regulators, market access, all of those different parameters, both here and now today, and also you know, tomorrow and into the future as well, so that we're making sure that we're putting the right processes and procedures in place that support our farmers to make sure that we're ready to meet those changing needs and expectations moving into the future. So, I mean, I suppose you'd say we've always done those things over the recent years in the co-op. We've had a long history of improving the way that we do things. Our animal welfare has improved significantly in recent years, and we've been now classed as one of the world leaders in that space. Our milk quality has stepped up a significant amount over the last kind of 10 to 15 years. Based on where we came from, and of course you'll all be aware of the massive gains that we've made in terms of sustainability, whether it's through fencing off over 20,000 kilometres of waterways, the massive investment our farmers have made in effluent management systems and addressing those issues, and now moving forward looking at issues around climate and nutrient management and all of those types of things as well. And we've got a fantastic team of experts on the ground helping our farmers achieve those things as well. So you could say we've always been doing these things, but this is really the cooperative difference was really an opportunity to bring those things together into a more cohesive framework around what it is that we're doing. So why did we create it? Well, so the first point was around better managing the risks and opportunities that are existing in our market and in the world within which we operate. So we've all seen, you know, in recent years the increasing risks around regulation, different changing market expectations and consumer expectations, and we really wanted to make sure we had a good, robust process for making sure farmers were well supported to identify those things, work through those issues, and be ready when the time comes. So some of those things are risks, but other parts of those things are opportunities. There's opportunities to meet market needs ahead of the game and actually hopefully drive additional value for the products we produce. So really around making sure that we had a good system in place to cover those things. The second point was around building pride. As I said before, our farms have done some amazing things on farm in recent years, but we haven't really been able to leverage those things to the full extent because we didn't have a good story or a good framework to tell those stories from. If we look at some of our newer competitors in the market for milk in New Zealand, they've done a really great job of being able to market some of the progress that they have made through having one cohesive package or framework within which they operate. So it was trying to be able to build that pride in the cooperative and be able to tell the story about the good things our farmers are doing. And the third one was around the farmer experience. Fonterra's developed from a whole bunch of legacy companies, and I'm sure all the farmers on this call would probably agree that the experience has at times been a little bit clunky. You know, a lot of different programs that have developed over a lot of different, over a long time and haven't always been particularly well connected. So that's probably a longer term project, but hopefully you'll already see that some of the things that we do are starting to align into a more, one size fits all type of approach rather than a whole lot of different components that our farmers have been dealing with in the past. So then the next question is of course, how did we go about developing cooperative difference? And the simple answer is that we went and asked farmers what they or how they wanted the cooperative to support them, and that included questions around what kind of expertise and help do you want? How should farmers be recognised? Should we use financial incentives or not financial incentives? All of those types of questions. So we ran about 15 focus groups with a wide variety of farmers around the country in late 2018. And we basically collated all the feedback from those sessions into a set of kind of principles to help us guide the development of the framework. So these are the 6 basic principles. So as you can imagine, when you talk to a number of farmers with different viewpoints from all around the country, you end up with a very diverse set of feedback. But these were the themes that came through really strongly across the entire country, no matter who we were talking to. So the first one was that we're a farmer and cooperative. We shouldn't just copy our commercial competitors, that we should behave like a co-op. So that was the kind of key takeout. Second one was that we should be keeping things simple, and I think we can all acknowledge that at times Fonterra is quite good at making things complicated when we don't need to be. Third one was around farmer support. The message there was that farmers really valued the support that Fonterra offers, whether it's through our sustainable dairy advisors, area manager teams, service centre, all of those different farm source stores, all of those different avenues. They really value that, but they want to see that continue and us to build on that. But more in that kind of service delivery way, as opposed to, being over top of and kind of dictatorial, obviously. The fourth one was around providing better future direction. So really leveraging all of the information we have from markets, regulators, government relations, the customer research we do, using that stuff and being able to tell farmers as early as we can about potential changes in direction, even if the message isn't something that farmers necessarily always want to hear. The message was, if you give a problem to the farmers will find the solution, and so the sooner we talk to farmers about those things, the better. Fifth one was around recognising performance. So really mixed bag in terms of the feedback on this, in terms of how the co-op should recognise performance, and we can talk a little bit about that further down the track. And then the last one was probably the strongest piece of feedback out of all, was that we should protect our strong core. So by that we mean our minimum terms of supply. We need to make sure that everyone in the co-op is meeting those. Where people are struggling, that we get in behind and support them. But if change isn't forthcoming and the co-op is put at risk, that we should be being really firm and making sure that we hold the line on those issues. So the basic structure of the cooperative difference framework, first up, we try to align everything we do now around those 5 key focus areas. So, and again, keeping it simple, we try to call them what they are. So milk, co-op and prosperity, animals, environment, people and community. They're the kind of fundamental parts of everything that we need to probably be concerned about, and from an on-farm perspective. So you'll see in the terms of supply, in the Farmer's Handbook, all of these documents now are aligned to those 5 focus areas, just to kind of add an air of simplicity. And even our internal structure has followed that line now. Next to that, you'll see our core, which is that really represents the terms of supply, the farm dairy assessment, the farm dairy records, all of the things that go into making sure that we are meeting all of the expectations of us here and now. So that's customer, market access, regulators, all of those things. That's the real, mandatory part of the framework, you might say, that everyone has to meet if they're going to supply milk to the cooperative. The next part is our next step, so that's the reward and recognition component, which I'll go into a little bit more detail about shortly. But that's how we recognise performance within the co-op and reward and encourage behaviours and practices that are going to support value for the co-op in the longer term. And our future is a new part that we're still working out exactly how to roll it out, but it comes back to that point around using all of the information that we have from customers, consumers, market, and giving some really clear guidance to farmers around what that stuff looks like as best as we can. It's likely to change over time, and we're constantly reviewing it, but for the first time we're really starting to build a kind of single view from the co-op perspective of what are the things that we need to be focusing on to make sure we're successful in the longer term. So this is basically a picture of the reward and recognition component. So again, farmers told us that that they wanted us to keep things relatively simple. Sorry, I noticed there's a bit of a delay in the slides changing, so it'll pop up on your screen in a minute. So basically, we've tried to keep the reward and recognition piece really simple. So all you have to do is achieve a single achievement under each of the non-milk focus areas, so people and community, environment, animals, and co-op and prosperity. So anyone that's engaged with the cooperative difference this year will know that there's just one achievement you have to tick off under each of them. So for example, environment is you've got to have your farm environment plan in place or be on the waiting list with our team to get one. Animals is around developing an animal health plan with your veterinarian. So they're simple one-off things that we believe, based on all the research we've done, are probably the next most important things that farmers should be focusing on that aren't yet either regulatory or minimum standard requirements. So then the second part of the framework is the milk quality aspect, and that really determines the overall achievement level within the scheme. Obviously, milk's a pretty critical component of the value that we generate. So we have a metric called milk quality excellence, which takes into account somatic cell count, FEI rating, and whether you're grade free or not. And basically, if you can achieve that for any 3 months, along with the other 4 requirements, you get to Te Pūtaki, which is level 1. Any 6 months, you get to Te Puku, which is level 2, and all season is Te Tihi, which is the ultimate level. And just those Te Reo names, they are referencing to a story about a journey up a mountain. So Te Pūtaki is kind of like the start of your journey. Te Puku is the middle, where you can kind of, look back at where you've come from, but also look up to the summit is where you want to be. And then Te Tihi is when you're actually, when you reach your goals, but also acknowledging that there's always another mountain to climb over the next hill, because as we know, nothing stands still in this industry. So that's how the current framework works. Again, most of you possibly know, but the recognition behind that is currently not financial. It is basically an allocation of farm source reward dollars as an acknowledgement of the achievement. But the decision was made at least for the initial season or 2 for the framework that it wouldn't be a financial incentive-based program. Basically, because when we spoke to farmers about what they wanted, there was a lot of support for financial incentives, but for the ones that were uneasy about it, they had concerns around cost. So making a scheme that was very complicated and expensive to administer, which I think we're now in a position where we've proved that we can do that in a low cost, simple way. And the other one was around being able to demonstrate value, which now we have a new strategy in place, which is very much underpinned by that very value proposition. So that's why it launched without financial incentives. And as Joe said, we've just recently made an announcement that that's going to change shortly. So we'll get into that in a second. The last point about the current structure is that everything is really backed up by that industry-leading farmer support, and making sure that we don't just set a bunch of expectations and requirements and say, the market's going to require these things, but that we've actually got a team behind you that are there to help navigate through that stuff. And classic example is obviously the Sustainable Dairy Advisors and the work that they do with the farm environment plans, which is very much around trying to help farmers get to the point where they need to be. And as we've just seen with the recent announcements, those things are going to be a regulatory requirement before long. So hopefully our farmers are well placed to be ahead of the game on that. So that's largely the structure of the framework as it is at the moment. So the next question is what is changing? So based on the announcements we made yesterday, how does that change the framework? So just in case anyone missed the communication yesterday, so yesterday Miles announced the introduction of what's been called the Cooperative Difference Payment, and that is basically a new milk payment parameter that will see a farmer's milk price influenced by their achievement under the Cooperative Difference. So this will replace the farm source reward dollars component of the framework. Key points: it comes into effect from 1st of June 2021. So this will not be for this current season that we're just entering now. So it'll start from 1st of June 2021, and any payment will likely be made in the retro at the end of, midway through 22. It is up to a maximum of 10 cents per kilogram of milk solids. So what that means is the maximum impact of this across the entire supply base will be 10 cents. Exactly how we allocate that 10 cents is yet to be decided. So that framework I showed you before with the 3 levels, we're looking at options as to whether that's fit for purpose and if there's a better way of doing it when we add a financial element into the mix. And so we're going to be talking to farmers over the next few months just to kind of flesh that out a little bit further. One of the examples we are looking at is using the existing framework as it currently is, but we're also looking at a number of other options as well, just to make sure we get it right. And the last point is that the amount and the criteria that farmers have to meet will be set annually by the board. So while it's been approved for 10 cents for that initial season, just like all the other milk payment parameters that influence milk price, that will be set by the board on an ongoing basis. So it could change, basically. So milk payment parameter, if you're not familiar with the term, milk payment parameter is the mechanism that is used already within the milk price that allocates value around fat and protein, capacity adjustment and volume adjustment. So they're the existing milk payment parameters. So under this proposal, farm gate milk price doesn't change, it stays the same, but it is a recognition of the different value that of individual farmers' milk. If you look at the total range box there, so you can see at the moment we see a 75-cent range across the co-op as a result of those existing milk payment parameters. But for about 80% of farms, they're within that kind of 10 cents either side of average farm gate milk price as a result of the milk payment parameters. So what this new payment parameter will do will add an additional 10 cents of, I suppose, range within that, within the payment. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the 75 cents will then become 85 cents. It'll probably, you know, for most farmers, it won't have near that same effect. So then the next question, of course, is why are we doing this? So since Cooperative Difference was launched early in 2019, the board has obviously released their new strategy, which is very much focused on generating value from our farmers' New Zealand sourced milk. That obviously came in after the Cooperative Difference was launched, but the board has been through an extensive process of researching where the value lies and where the opportunities are for the co-op, and they identified 3 key areas where they wanted us to focus. That is innovation, sustainability and efficiency. So innovation, if you look at stuff we're already doing, so our Trusted Goodness brand, that delivered a $97 million additional margin in 2019 year. So this is where we're going out, and we're offering customers the ability to put you know, basically licensing them to use specific brands on their products to say this is New Zealand pasture-based milk or it's GMO-free, all of those types of things, and get basically receiving a premium for being able to do that because it is certified as such. So 97 million in 2019. Typical type of example. There's a brand we don't go public with the actual brands at question here, but there's a grass-fed New Zealand butter brand selling in China at the moment that we get about $1,000 US a ton extra premium for, just because of that pasture-based story. And GMO products traditionally are in that same kind of margin as well, where we do see good premiums for those types of practices. Those things will change over time though, so the Cooperative Difference is about making sure that we're ready for when the next market need or desire pops up, and we're doing more specific individual market research at the moment to try and identify those things so we can be really clear on what they are. The next one around sustainability. One of the major drivers behind this is a lot of our major customers, and we're talking about $2 billion worth of sales. They have their own very strict targets around sustainability, and they expect their suppliers to be helping them to contribute to meeting those expectations. So of that 200 billion, it's estimated about 300 million are at immediate risk if we don't move fast enough to address those concerns. And so these are the likes of, you know, Nestle's and Danone's and those type of bigger companies where they do come and audit us, they do look at our data, they do ask us very detailed questions about what it is that we're doing, and there is an expectation that we will meet their needs, and if we don't, then they look at alternative suppliers, or even worse, looking at non-dairy substitutes. And the other part that's harder to value in that space is the brand and reputation stuff, the support of our communities. But if we get the stuff wrong, I think we've already seen that this can cause us some pretty significant issues. And equally, it does also create opportunities. So, for example, the fencing, waterway fencing requirements that were announced by government in draft form recently would have required us to pull out a whole lot of fences that we'd already put in, but we're in a really strong position to go back to government and say, well, we actually already did this voluntarily. We can focus our efforts elsewhere for better bang for buck. and we were able to successfully negotiate a change to that policy on the basis of the stuff that we were ahead of the game and that we're doing the right thing. The last one's around efficiency, and there's kind of 2 points here. One is making sure that we remain competitive for milk. There are a number of milk competitors in New Zealand that are paying based on value and sustainability criteria, and if we don't keep up, then we risk losing milk to those competitors. And one of our biggest benefits is our scale and efficiency. The size that we have. The other one is around the fact that great milk just invariably makes better product. We see improved product yield, shelf life, flavour, and it also allows us to create new products that we wouldn't otherwise be able to create based on that improving milk quality. So basically we can manufacture stuff that is of higher value, and that's some of the drivers behind why people pay more for New Zealand-based Fonterra milk or products, but it also means that we can manufacture it cheaper because we're not having to shift milk around to get the right quality milk in the right plant at the right time. We can basically use generic milk no matter where it's coming from, no matter the time of the season, and make the products that we need to make that is of highest value. So in terms of how this will move forward, so as I said before, the board has approved it at a high level audit. We're now moving through looking at all those different implementation options. We're looking at the achievements, so having a farm environment plan, all that kind of stuff, is that still relevant? And the milk quality parameters, we've got some guidance from board, and shareholders council have given us some guidance as well around making sure that we address some of the existing issues that sit within the milk quality achievement. And then also looking at what are the types of changes to the verification process that we need to make sure it's robust, but still, simple, cheap to implement, and effective. So we're going to be talking to some farmers around that in July to test the thinking and get their feedback on what the best options are. It'll be approved by CRC, which is a subcommittee of the board and shareholders council, in November hopefully, and then we'll be communicating to farmers early in 2021 on what the next steps look like. And that's it. So I haven't gone into too much detail there. Some of that detail is still under development, but equally I know there'll probably be some questions out there. So I'll throw it back to you, Joe, and see if anyone's got any queries.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael, for that. They're a bit quiet on the question front today. We do much prefer to have a live audience here. But it's really interesting as you discuss sort of where we're heading with this, and I'm not sure if you heard earlier, we talked about our balanced scorecard approach and how as we're always constantly evolving it, we're looking at where are our minimum standards set and where do we push ourselves out to achieve sort of best practice or to sort of maximise the potential in each of those areas. And of course there's always a trade-off, and what you've been able to give is probably greater clarity and direction as to where we need to stretch ourselves to, and potentially what sort of information we might need along the journey to prove the story behind it. And what we find at our farm, which is really interesting, is that we do collect a lot of data, but for us to get value from the data, we need to also look for where the management potential or gains can be made. And it tends to be fairly complementary, as to this point, like all the information we're collecting around animal welfare, environmental outcomes, we see values in management decisions that actually ultimately have a positive impact on our productivity. Do you think, as we move forward more and more into this space, are there other areas that you think we might need to start collecting more information around our own particular individual farms? And do you think that we might be able to get some complementary productivity gains from that as well? Have you given that sort of level of detail much thought, or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the things we're obviously very conscious of is that farmers don't want to be spending their time recording information that, unless it's really worthwhile. So one of the things we've recently done is actually kind of trimmed back and really focus on the stuff that's most important in terms of being able to deliver all those benefits we've been talking about. But inevitably there are going to be other places within the business where customers are going to they've got expectations now, and it's only going to grow, that we are delivering better information around what's happening on farm. So I think the opportunity is to make sure that we're asking the right questions of farmers, but equally that we're using that information wherever we can to actually support farmers in their decision making through tools and support that we kind of talked about before, so that hopefully they're not having to enter it in 3 different places 5 different times.
Yeah, and we were just talking about the wealth of information that's starting to come through using different products and models out there, and the level of detail we can start to get to. So I know that Fonterra has a wonderful team of trusted advisors we do at our farm too, who have been really helpful about guiding the direction of where we need to head in each of those areas. So it's wonderful to be able to have that access to that support as well, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we don't have any further questions. Tom, do you have any questions about this? Thank you, Michael. We are about to sort of wrap up where we're at with it. If farmers want to have more information about this, I know that there's some stuff on your website. Who are they best to talk to, Michael, if they've got some more questions or queries about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Have a chat to the area managers in the first instance, or call the service centre. They're pretty well briefed on it as well, so they should be able to give them any answers they need.
Great. Cool. Well, thank you, Michael, for phoning in. Tom and I are way out of our comfort zone here trying to work with all this technology, but it's been really nice to have you join us, and hopefully that's worked for the participants as well to be able to access your information. I know you've been really close to this project, so it was really nice to be able to get hold of you today just after the announcement was made. So thank you for taking the time, Michael.
Yep, no, you've done well, team. Thanks very much.
Okay, see ya. Bye, Michael. Okay, so I guess just to wrap up, like as I said before, we much prefer to have a live audience, don't we, Tom? We love having you on farm, and we've really missed over the last few months not being able to have as much interaction with people on farm. So we just wanted to kind of highlight, today was about reviewing the year that has just been. There's a lot of information there. We do gather and analyse a lot of data. So if there's anything in particular that you are interested in, we can access that information and share it with you. We do have our Tuesday farm walks that we love having people come out and join us, whether it's to talk about seasonal issues or whether it's to talk about something that you might have seen on the website or you might have heard, or some queries that you might have. And you can also subscribe to our weekly update, which we send a newsletter out, or you can access that via Facebook. Now, our next focus day, 23rd of September, you'll be pretty much through calving, eh, Tom?
Hope so, yeah, and preparing for mating, really.
Yep, and we're looking forward to having everybody out on farm again. So we will be able to host a live event at that stage, which would be really cool. Now, there's just a couple of questions that have popped through. Okay, so we've got a bit of time. We've got about 6 minutes for questions before we finish. So let's do the first one for Tom here. Where to this season for animal health, metri checking, lameness, etc.? So what are your plans around that? So let's deal with the metri checking first. What's your strategy? Will you do whole herd metri check of the herd?
Yeah, so we usually split the metri checking into 2 lots. So around probably the 5th of August, we'll paint all the cows one colour, and then as other cows calve and enter the milking herd, they'll become another colour. Once 2 weeks has elapsed, so looking around the 20th of August, we'll metri check those early calvers and cure those ones, and then 2 weeks prior to the start of mating, we'll do the rest of the herd. Any that don't fall in that time, we'll make a note of. And yeah, with ProTrack going in this week, we'll be able to pull those out nice and easily. We won't need 2 people in the shed, which has been the annoyance of the old system for the last few years. Pulling out a handful of cows has been quite a big job, having to look for those 5 or 6 cows. So,
and Matthew also asked about lameness. So we had a little bit of information in a handout about our lameness rates. Tell us a little bit about what we've done about that, what our approach is.
So we've seen we've had an issue. We dealt with a lot of lameness going through last spring. So we've spent a lot of money upgrading our races. We've improved about almost 3 kilometres over the last 12 months. It's cost us a lot of money, but we're also missed out on potential milk, having 140 plus cows go lame this season. So that's also time expensive. Myself and my staff trimming feet all the time, and also it's not a good look having hobbly cows around. So spending money on the races one area. We've also had Bill Hancock from Cambridge Vets do some analysis as he's a accredited healthy hoof advisor. So we're going to put an extra mirror add cups on, so we can actually, when we press the button for the gate, we can actually see what's going on in the yard without having to jump up and down the steps, which causes issue for cow flow onto the platform. We're also going to split our main herd in half, and so that the cows have actually got more room to turn around as the gate goes around the yard. So, multi-pronged attack on reducing this lameness, but hopefully it all comes to fruition through spring, and we really see the results.
Did you talk about the recording board and the Healthy Hoof app?
Yeah, so rather than putting in the lame cows as we go, we've drawn up a Healthy Hoof board, so we can record the cow number, the date, the issue that they've had, and the treatment we've given. And then at a later date, we can input all that data and then actually go back through and look, what's causing our major issue? Is it all foot rot? What's causing that, or is it all stone bruising or white lines? So we'll have again more data. We'll analyse that, and we'll be able to come up with a solution.
Yeah. Cool, thanks Tom. And John's got a really good question about the hours worked. I'll just quickly read it out. So currently we're using about you can all read the question anyway, can't you? About 7,000 hours to run the farm. John's question is about if we drop down our labour, our FTEs allocated for this year, our total hours available for us, of course, are going to be quite a bit less. So around about 5,900. Thank you for doing the maths, John. What's our planned approach to it? We probably haven't sat down and thought annually about how the hours work. The approach that we've taken, John, more is about where our time is spent, and what we've tried to look at is the areas that we're spending more time in, where we can potentially substitute technology or efficient processes, or whether that job is actually needed. And then we've started to look at, can we take out some of the money invested in the time, and can we invest in technology in that space? So there's probably two. Tom's already talked about the drafting, and the drafting in particular we saw was taking up a lot of our time during the year, and the other one was about getting cows in. So the other approach that we're looking at to try and reduce the hours that we require, so remember we're dropping down about 0.25 of a labour unit this year, we're looking at putting in using backlatch, aren't we, Tom?
Yep. So we'll I'm not sure how it will work. People that have used it, they don't have in-shed feeding, and they say it works really well. So it'll be a trial by error. Once we've got cows milking, we'll get them trained on that. Potentially while they're dry, we'll be able to play with it, just going from one paddock to the next. But yeah, excited. If the cows can be walking to the shed or released to come to the shed, and I can go and check the springers and not have to round them up, it's going to save me 20 minutes in the morning. And when you are tired during spring, that extra 20 minutes of being in bed or doing something else to allow you 20 minutes extra for lunch or breakfast, it's all beneficial.
And probably on that note, John, I mean, looking at it from an annualised point of view is quite interesting. It'd be quite good to sit down with you and look at how you would plan out going backwards. We've sort of always worked on time and task, and how we've structured sort of the day and planned around that mix between people and technology. So yeah, really keen to hear ideas about that space and how we might plan that, because picking that things will change in the current employment environment, and lots of people will be sort of thinking about how this might work a little bit better for them. So that's kind of the last of our questions, and sort of brings us to the end of today. So like I reiterated before, thanks for watching. It was great to have you guys there. Please come along to our next Focus Day. I just wanted to say a big thanks, of course, to St Peter's and Lincoln University, and also LIC, PGG Wrightson's, DNZ Balance, FarmSource and Westpac. We can't do what we do without all their support and their wonderful expertise that helps us along the journey. We're learning a lot as we go, and we really appreciate their input along with the wider public as well. And we just wanted to say thank you, and we were just going to close off by showing you another one, the picture of the farm again, since you couldn't be here with us. So thank you, and we will catch you later. Enjoy this clip again.